think I don't know that your brain is trying to process the horrible fact that, oh my god, it talks?
Most of the horror games that I talk about lean a lot on tension, slow pacing, locked doors, puzzles, and ammo conservation. But Hunter the Reckoning was the complete opposite. It cranked the pacing all the way up to a twin-stick shooter with magic and melee thrown in. And while the mechanics aren't complex, it's a game that just wants to keep you moving forward. It's dark and urban, pretty campy, but it stuck with a lot of us who grew up with it. And for me, that core memory always starts with one boss fight in the game, the giant teddy bear. So what was Hunter the Reckoning? Hunter the Reckoning wasn't trying to compete with Resident Evil or Silent Hill or those other big survival horror games. It's not built around puzzles or inventory management. It's built to move. It launched in 2002, first on the Xbox and then a little bit later on the GameCube. Microsoft was still one of the new kids in the console space, trying to prove it could be more than just shooters and sports games. This game was one of those early experiments. It's dark, loud, and fast. It was developed by High Voltage Software and published by Interplay. And on paper, it's an adaptation of the World of Darkness tabletop RPG, the same universe as Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse. The tabletop game is about ordinary people who suddenly see the truth, that monsters are real and they're not waiting for heroes. Those people get imbued with powers and purpose. They're still human, but they're now hunters. The game keeps that idea intact. You're dropped into Ashcroft, a crumbling industrial town built around a prison. When that prison becomes ground zero for an outbreak of wraiths, vampires, and all kinds of other monsters. These 4 hunters answer the call: the Avenger, the Martyr, the Defender, and the Judge. Each has a different flavor of combat and edge powers, that supernatural spark that separates them from civilians. The tone is urban gothic horror, graveyards, factories, city streets, but it's not slow or atmospheric in the same way as other horror games. It's a third-person twin-stick shooter with melee weapons and magic layered into it. It keeps you pushing forward, wave after wave of enemies, big clunky weapons, fast arenas. Lore is there if you look for it, but the game's heart is in the action. That's what made it feel different in 2002. While other horror games were turning the screws on tension, Hunter was throwing you into the thick of it. Dark comic book violence, arcade pacing, and just enough story to keep you wanting to go deeper. One of the first things Hunter throws at you is a choice. 4 characters, 4 playstyles. There's no tutorial really or no explanation. Just pick who feels right and start swinging. And each one plays totally different. Deuce is the closest thing the game has to a tank. He's big and slow and built to punish. He's an ex-con, but in the game he becomes the Avenger. Rage-driven, relentless, and all about brute force. He starts with a massive axe and a shotgun, and his stats lean toward high strength and durability, which means he can charge into a crowd and make space the old-fashioned way by breaking everything in front of him. And his edge powers are designed to keep that momentum going, like his cleave power lets him swing through multiple enemies. Father Esteban is the Judge. He was the prison chaplain at Ashcroft Penitentiary, the guy who gave the last rites to inmates. He was imbued and became a hunter during the chaos of Arcady's execution like the others. He's the range specialist. He starts with a crossbow and a sword, and his whole loadout is built around keeping enemies at a distance while controlling the battlefield. He's not as durable as Deuce, but his magic makes up for it. One of his powers, the Word of Power, can drop tougher enemies and whole crowds at once. Esteban plays like a tactician. He's not great when overwhelmed, but if you're watching your angles and lining up your shots, he can carry a team by thinning the herd. Samantha is the most balanced of the group. She was a cop before she was imbued, and that carries into her role here, adaptable, steady, and protective. She starts with a katana and a magnum. The katana gives her solid melee range, and the magnum hits pretty hard, but it's really slow. She has to reload often, which forces a rhythm to her combat. stats, though, are middle of the road across the board, and her edges reinforce that hybrid style, like Rejuvenate, which is a healing power, or Ward, which lets her block damage. She's not flashy, but she's consistent. Whether you're playing solo or co-op, Samantha's the kind of character that adapts to whatever you need, holding a hallway or cleaning up stragglers, or keeping everyone alive while things fall apart. And finally there's Cassandra. She's the wild card, she's the martyr. And her whole style is built around risk, high damage, low survivability, fast, fragile, and brutal. She comes with dual blades and a pair of pistols, and her stats reflect that twitchy speed. She's the fastest of the four, and her edges make her even more volatile. Cassandra is for players who don't care about staying safe. You get in, do your damage, and hope you thin the crowd before they can retaliate. In co-op, she's the damage dealer. In solo, she's high risk, high reward. So what makes these roles interesting isn't just the flavor text or the weapons, it's how they play off each other. Each hunter has a different run speed, their ammo usage and reload times are totally different, their melee reach varies. Even their edge costs change, which affects how often they can use their powers. In co-op, that becomes a real system. Deuce is clearing lanes while Esteban sets up range support. Samantha drops a ward at the last second to block a death blow. Cassandra dives into the horde and melts a mini-boss while someone else covers the exit. The best runs aren't just about staying alive, they're about syncing reloads, watching each other's flanks, and knowing when to pop your edge versus when to hold it. The game never tells you how to do that, it just throws you in and lets the team dynamic sort itself out. And honestly, that's part of what makes it so great. Each hunter feels like their own archetype, not just in lore, but in how they play. And when it all clicks, Hunter the Reckoning starts to feel less like a button masher and more like a real survival horror brawler, with team synergy baked in. I really wish I could have captured that for this video, because where this game shines is in its co-op, and I just couldn't do that for this. So all of my gameplay here is solo. So here's what Hunter is really built around. Shoot, slice, cleanse, and move on. That's the core loop of the game. It's not trying to reinvent action. It's trying to feel fast, responsive, and just crunchy enough to stay satisfying for over 20 missions. And honestly, it kind of works. You have a handful of tools throughout the game. You have your default gun and melee weapon for each character, but then you can pick up additional guns throughout the game. There's shotguns, SMGs, flamethrowers, RPGs, and they all have different reload times and ammo limits. And then the default melee weapon is infinite. There's no cooldown, no resource cost, you just swing away. But the reach is a lot shorter than the guns, obviously, and it puts you in danger if you miss time a hit. So the rhythm you fall into is this swap dance. You clear a lane with your gun, swap to your melee when the horde closes in, back up, breathe, and shoot again. It's not deep in a tactical sense, but the constant switching feels decent, especially when things get chaotic. And then your edge powers. You build it up by playing well, grabbing pickups, or just surviving long enough. And when things go sideways, that's when you hit it. The edge system is your oh crap button. You're using them for healing or massive AoE damage. You're not spamming these every few seconds. It's more like hold on to this until you're about to lose a life, and then let it rip. It gives combat a sense of rhythm, regular chaos, and a burst of power to reset it. The game also drops pickups constantly. There's ammo, health, conviction boosts, sometimes some buffs. That really ties into a very early 2000s kind of meta. Kite the crowd until drops appear. And if you're playing solo, it gets pretty tough. In co-op though, it turns into this kind of silent agreement. You kite, I grab health, you revive, I cover. Someone uses edge now. It's messy, but it works. The chaos is part of the fun. What's wild is how it all escalates. The longer a level goes, the more it starts to feel like you're hanging on by a thread. You burn through resources pretty fast. Enemies start flooding in from multiple sides, and unless you're careful with your spacing and swap rhythm, it's easy to get boxed in, especially if you don't know where the next pickup's going to be. And the levels aren't just arenas, you're moving through actual locations. There's cemeteries, prisons, hospitals, mansions. There's 23 stages in total, and the design does a decent job of mixing things up. Some levels are short, like 5 or 6 minutes, and others stretch out to almost 30 minutes if you're clearing everything or escorting NPCs. That pacing shift helps a bit. You get in and clear a tight map, and then next time you're navigating a maze with multiple objectives. Some missions are all about combat, others are slower, find this switch, rescue this person, survive a boss. It keeps the formula from getting too stale in most cases, especially because the combat itself isn't very deep. So they needed level pacing to do some of that work. And honestly, in my opinion, it kind of pulled it off. The game knows how to ramp intensity. One mission might start off slow, let you stock up on resources, maybe even explore a little bit. But halfway through, the lights flicker, a mini-boss spawns, and suddenly you're juggling pickups, revives, edge powers, and you're trying to survive long enough to hit the next checkpoint. It's not perfect, some levels go on a bit too long, some fights feel like enemy spam, but when it works, it nails that arcade action feeling. Just a little strategic, a little messy, but you always feel like you're moving towards something and moving forward. Hey, just real quick, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. Seriously, you guys have been amazing lately. And if you're enjoying this one, consider hitting sub if you haven't already. It really does help grow the channel tremendously. There's already a bunch of other hidden and forgotten gems on here, and a lot more coming. And if you're one of the many new subs who found the channel through the Resident Evil videos, I hope you're into this one too. I love making the Resident Evil videos, but I also really like showing off the games like this, stuff that kind of got left behind. Even if they weren't perfect, they meant something to somebody. And I will still be working through the rest of the Resident Evil games, so don't worry. But I want to keep mixing in these non-Resident Evil titles now and then, just to show how wide this channel really goes. The save room's a big place, and we're really just getting started. But if you're enjoying the video, drop a like, it really does help. And let me know in the comments if you've ever played this one, if you have any good memories with friends with it, or if you're just not hearing of it. But thanks again for being here, let's get back into it.
Explained as animal mauling. But now a mysterious force has imbued a chosen few humans with not just the knowledge of the evil, but with the power to do something about it. These imbued have become hunters.
The enemies aren't the most complex you'll ever fight, but they don't really need to be. The game's more about chaos management than deep mechanical nuances, and that kind of works for it. You have your undead, which are basically lane blockers, cannon fodder. They shamble and soak up shots, mostly existing to force you into repositioning. They're not dangerous on their own, but when 10 of them stack up behind a heavier enemy or corner you while you're reloading, they suddenly feel a bit more dangerous. And then you have your ghosts and wraiths. They're the enemies that really push you to use your edge powers. They phase in and out, they ignore some attacks, and they mess with your rhythm. You're not just shooting anymore, you're kind of reacting. Some enemies, like vampires or the bigger possessed guys, are designed to punish bad habits. They hit a bit harder, they move a lot faster, and they love catching you mid-reload. If you're greedy, trying to finish a clip when you should be dodging, they'll make you pay for it. These are the fights that force you to balance aggression with positioning. You can't just stand there and tank it. Bosses are where the game leans more into spectacle. Most of them are just big and loud and a lot more aggressive. Not a ton of phases or intricate mechanics, but what they do well is control the arena. Almost every boss fight becomes an exercise in crowd control. Waves of enemies spawning in while the boss keeps pressuring you. You can't just focus on the big guy, you have to constantly pivot between the boss and the other enemies. The design isn't about perfect balance, it's about pressure. It wants you to feel overwhelmed, then barely scraping through. It's more like Gauntlet than Dark Souls, and that's kind of the point. This game isn't about mastering systems, it's about surviving the chaos with whatever tools you have left.
I'm not letting you do this again. I should have killed you last time. You don't understand. Last time was an accident. It wasn't my fault. This time someone did it on purpose. The rave opened the hole again.
So for the story in this game, it opens with one of those great something's about to go very wrong setups. We're in Ashcroft, a grim little prison town in White Wolf's world of darkness. It's the kind of place where nothing good ever really happens. The penitentiary has been a playground for vampires for years. Inmates disappear into experiments, and the dead don't always stay that way.
They call this the imbuing. When everything you've ever known becomes a lie. The secret is laid bare, and the truth is revealed. There it stands in all its unholy glory, evil personified and presented for hideous edification.
1 year before the game actually starts, 4 normal people walk into the nightmare without realizing it. They're all attending the execution of a serial killer named Nathaniel Arcady at Ashcroft Penitentiary. A priest, a cop, a biker, and a club kid. And right there, during the execution, the veil tears. Wraiths rise up, supernatural forces start pouring into the prison. And these 4 people suddenly see the world for what it really is. In White Wolf terms, they get imbued, marked by something higher and turned into hunters. They manage to seal the prison and lock most of the evil back inside, but they walk away changed. Then we fast forward a year later. The town, in its infinite wisdom, decides to throw a rave in the prison courtyard. Basically, the worst idea possible. All that sealed darkness gets stirred back up. Spirits break loose. The feeding ground wakes up again. Ashcroft is a nightmare zone.
And so, we've come back, just as we promised.
So our 4 hunters return. This time, they're not witnesses, they're participants. Each one brings their own skills and baggage. Deuce with his brute force, Father Cortez with his faith, Samantha with her precision, and Cassandra with her speed and her chaos. Together, they're back in the prison, fighting through an entire town overrun by wraiths, vampires, and all kinds of craziness. The story is not subtle about what's going on. You're not unraveling a mystery so much as cleaning up the supernatural mess. But there are some great pulp horror twists buried in there. The prison's warden, Dagenhart, turns out to be a vampire pulling the strings. Dr. Hadrian, a grotesque flesh-sculpting scientist, is playing Frankenstein with his inmates, and Arcady himself is still alive as a werewolf. And through all of it, the spirits are crying for revenge because the hunters, shut them away years ago. It all comes to a head in Dagenhart's mansion after fighting through wraiths, vampires, and abominations. Dagenhart reawakens and reveals his real plan. He's been trying to resurrect his family by reactivating the haunting. The hunters put him down for good, release the tortured spirits, and escape Ashcroft before it collapses into its own darkness. What makes the story work isn't its complexity, it's the mood. This isn't Silent Hill-style psychological horror, or Resident Evil's corporate conspiracy. It's a grindhouse urban horror. You're fighting the darkness you accidentally helped unleash. The villains are big and bold. Vampires, werewolves, mad scientists. And the game just keeps throwing you forward from one set piece to the next. It's also a neat inversion of the Chosen One trope. The hunters aren't superheroes. They're regular people who saw too much and can't look away anymore. Their powers are a burden. The world they're fighting in isn't clean, and that's why the story lands. It's not trying to be deep lore, it's trying to make you feel like you're knee-deep in a comic book where the panels just keep turning. That's the core of Hunter the Reckoning's story, a cursed town, 4 reluctant warriors, and a mission that's as much about redemption as it is about killing monsters. So if we're actually wondering what the game is, what it actually is, or where it fits into that early 2000s chunk of console history, it helps to look at what else was sitting next to it on the shelf. Hunter came out in 2002, like I had mentioned, on the original Xbox. They got a GameCube port later that same year, but this was really positioned as an Xbox showcase at the time. One of the early mature-rated exclusives for that system, back when Microsoft was still trying to carve out space for darker, edgier games. On the surface, Hunter gets compared a lot to its cousins from that era. Think of Gauntlet Dark Legacy or Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, Champions of Norrath. That whole wave of top-down or isometric hack-and-slash action games with co-op, loot, and waves of enemies. If you were a teenager in the early 2000s looking for a couch co-op game that weren't shooters or sports titles, this was your wheelhouse. But Hunter always felt a little different. It's not medieval, there's no armor sets and dragons. This is a modern-day grimy urban horror game. You have guns, chainsaws, magical edge powers, and you're fighting ghosts, vampires, and corrupted humans. And it all sits inside the World of Darkness universe, which gives it this baked-in tone of apocalypse and moral weight that you just didn't get from most of those other games. Even if the game doesn't shove lore in your face, the mood is still there. It feels like it was built on a darker foundation. There's also something louder and more theatrical about Hunter compared to its cousins. The blood sprays, the character voice lines, the edge powers exploding across the screen. It's not just co-op, it's co-op that wants to feel intense. Not always deep, but always big. It's a game that wants to move fast, make noise, and fill your screen with monsters. And the dev team kept pushing that formula. After the first game, there were 2 follow-ups, Hunter the Reckoning Wayward, that launched on the PS2 in 2003, and it brings you back to Ashcroft with a slightly tweaked format. There's more characters, bigger mission-based structure, and some balance changes that try to tighten up the chaos a little bit. It's not a huge leap forward, but it shows the team trying to respond to player feedback. That same year, Hunter the Reckoning Redeemer hit the Xbox. This one's set about 10 years later and brings the original Hunters back along with a new character. It leans harder into the story side of things, adds better cutscenes, some new enemy types, and more progression hooks. You can see them polishing the edges of the original game, but not reinventing it, just giving it more meat. Across all 3 games, the core vibe stays consistent. Dark modern horror, fast action, big visual payoffs, and that blend of ranged melee and edge powers. But the later games try to smooth things out. There's better pacing, more variety, cleaner presentation. Hunter didn't reinvent the genre, but it carved out its own space. It wasn't Diablo, it wasn't Baldur's Gate. It was its own weird thing, half action, half supernatural brawler, but all set inside a morally broken world where regular people get dragged into comic-level fights, and try not to lose their humanity along the way. That's what makes it worth remembering. It didn't try to be safe, it tried to be loud, messy, and full of weird flavor. In an era of fantasy clones and sci-fi shooters, Hunter went all in on urban horror with a cast of angry vigilantes. And even if it didn't have the longest shelf life, it definitely left its mark in our memories. I mean, this was one of my favorite childhood games. So yeah, Hunter the Reckoning isn't some forgotten masterpiece. It's not secretly deeper than it looks, and it's not trying to be. But that's kind of why it still works. It's loud, fast, and it knows what it is. Sometimes you just want to pick a character, grab a shotgun, and tear through waves of monsters in a rundown prison town full of ghosts, vampires, and giant teddy bears. This game delivers that. No leveling trees, no loot systems, just movement, powers, and chaos. And for a lot of people, myself included, that's exactly what made it stick. It's one of those games you remember not because of some groundbreaking mechanic, but because of when and where you played it. Even now, it's kind of wild that this got made. A gritty co-op horror brawler based on a tabletop RPG that most players never even heard of. And it got sequels, people were into it. There's a reason it stuck in people's heads. It knew how to make an impression. So if you've never played it, or maybe you did, but it's been a while, I think it's worth a revisit. Just go in knowing what it is. Don't expect perfect design or deep lore. Just fire it up and grab a hunter and enjoy the ride. If you made it this far into the video, thank you. It really does mean a lot. If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider subbing. There's a whole channel full of horror games, forgotten gems, and weird mid-2000s experiments like this already on the channel. And there's a lot more coming. And hey, if you found this video fun, hit the like button, drop a comment down below, and let me know if Hunter was one of those games you played back in the day, or if this was your first time hearing about it. We have more Resident Evil videos on the way, so don't worry, and that series isn't going anywhere, but I'll definitely keep mixing in stuff like this because, let's be honest, not every game has to be a masterpiece. Some of them just need to be fun. But thanks again for watching, and as always, I'll see y'all later.
At the other end of that barrel. Do you think I don't know that your brain is trying to process the horrible fact that, oh my God, it talks? And if it talks, it thinks. And you can't stand that, can you? When are you going to learn that you're not hunters? You're sheep with shotguns. You don't want me